Hey everyone, welcome back to the Going Scared podcast. This is your host, Jessica Honegger, founder of the world-changing brand Noonday Collection. Join me here every week for conversations that encourage you to live a life of purpose by leaving comfort and going scared. Well, as you guys know, I'm the founder of Noonday, and we are starting our holiday shopping season. You might have heard the podcast series that we launched in August, where Liz Bohannon from Seiko Designs and I announced that Seiko is now merged under Noonday Collection, and we are now a one-stop ethical shop from anything that you might need for your gift giving this season. We have a men's collection, a scent collection, we have an apparel collection, accessories collection, an incredible home collection, and I'm serious. If you are going to invest in gifts, why not invest in gifts that are going to give? Not only do they give to the international entrepreneur that you are purchasing the item from, but they also give to a local entrepreneur across the United States when you purchase from a Noonday Collection ambassador. So hop on over to noondaycollection.com, host a trunk show, host a holiday giving event in your community, or just shop online and take care of all of your gift giving through our website at noondaycollection.com. All right, we are continuing with our myth busting series today, and this was a true honor to get to have Charles Feltman on the podcast. Charles is the author of The Thin Book of Trust, an essential primer for building trust at work, based on 3 decades of experience working with individuals and teams to build, maintain, and when necessary, restore trust. We have used this book at Noonday Collection as well as I've used it in my partnership with Travis, and I started using it at home quite a bit. So we really cover all these areas of trust today, and we're going to bust some myths that we all carry about trust. Charles Feltman has over 25 years of professional experience coaching, facilitating, consulting to, and training people who lead others. And I was reminded of his work when I recently was listening to Daring Greatly by Brene Brown, her podcast. He was recently on her podcast as well. He holds a BA in psychology from UC Santa Cruz and a master's in organizational development and communication from the University of Southern California. We carry around so many myths about trust, and trust is the foundation of all of our relationships. And really, business is about relationships, family is about relationship, community is about relationship. We need to learn how to build trusting relationships with others, and you're going to get to know every single thing you need to know about trust in today's episode. Thank you so much. It is such a gift to talk with you today.
I'm looking forward to it.
So Marie, Marie, I want to call her a wizard, although I know that, when you work with an executive coach, you got to do the work. But she came in during a very critical time in my business partner and I's relationship, where we had been in just crazy startup mode for years, building the plane while it was taking off. And then there came that moment where it was like, what was going to get us to our next level of leadership was not going to work. And so we just did deep work with her for over a year. And I tell you, Thin Book of Trust and the cycle of commitment. I mean, these are now just commonplace words at my organization. And so thank you for writing this book.
Oh, that's great to hear. I mean, I love it.
It's also helped with parenting. I'm parenting teens.
Yeah.
And it's just, so I wanted to start with this idea because we're in this series about, myth busting, and there's so many myths that we have about trust. And I think for me, I know I've often thought of trust as this binary thing. We either trust or we don't. You're either trustworthy or you're not. And you really break this down for us and provide these definitions and these distinctions around trust. But before we dive in, your definition of trust, I'd love for you to share what your definition of trust is.
Sure. Trust is, or trusting, is risking making something you value vulnerable to another person's actions.
And no one likes to hear that.
And many
It's
people,
dangerous.
yeah, it's like, what vulnerability? I
What
want
is
to,
vulnerability? I have to be vulnerable, but that's the crux of it.
yep, it absolutely is.
I have to tell you how you talk about distrust. It almost makes me cry. I was refreshing myself this morning before interviewing you. And you say, what is important to me is not safe with this person in this situation or any situation. That's what distrust is. And I just cringed. I just thought, oh my God, that's not the leader I want to be. That's not the mom I want to be. That's not the friend I want to be. And yet, what's so powerful about your work and your framework is that you actually show us that trust can be built and there can be repair where trust has been lost. So let's start with one of these myths, which is that you either trust someone completely or you can't trust someone at all, because I think that is pretty rampant.
Yes, it is, sadly. And well, I have to admit that was my belief before I really started, before I learned that there were different ways of trusting, different assessments that I could make about trusting someone that were far enough apart that I could have an assessment of trust, a positive assessment of trust, or their trustworthiness, if it were, in one of these areas of distinctions, and not so in another. So I could actually trust someone in certain situations and not others, to some degree more in certain situations than in others. I could be intentional, and the word I use is wise, about making decisions around trusting people. And that I didn't have to write someone off completely just because, say, for example, they are pretty bad at keeping their commitments. They may be trustworthy in that they really do care about me, us, what we're doing together. They are generally honest, they act with integrity, and they're really good at what they do. They just, for some reason, don't meet their commitments well.
Mm,
That's an example. Or
right.
it could be that they do meet their commitments well, but sometimes they stretch the truth. Or, so I can A, still trust them in those other kind of domains, and I think, cover what those four domains are. I can still trust them in those other domains, and I can also put some guardrails around the areas where I'm finding it difficult to trust them. Even better, I could actually maybe have a conversation with them
Oh
about
my
that.
gosh, yes. That's been the crux of our work, the conversations for action, the circle of commitment. Oh my goodness, this is the stuff that's been so clarifying. So let's go ahead and talk about those domains: care, sincerity, reliability, and competence, which I love this competence piece because I really tend to, I think, put a little bit more trust in someone. The competence weights pretty hard for me. And it's interesting because on our exec team in the hiring process, it's values. And of course you want the value and the fit, but I've always found when I'm like, oh, but gosh, look at their experience, their competence. And so it's been really nice for our team to be able to have these distinctions, to be able to say, I really do trust them in this area, but this is an area that, I feel like I need a little bit more proof before I
Yeah,
can really fully trust. So let's talk first, and care, of course. I mean, care is everything. It's the air that we breathe. Well, trust is the air we breathe, but really creating trust has to start with care. So let's break down that first one.
sure. That one is, and as you say, it's in many ways, I think it's fundamental to building trust and maintaining it over the long haul and repairing it. Care is an assessment. It's the assessment that I trust that you have my interests in mind as well as your own when you make decisions and take action, that you have my good in mind, or my best interests, or you intend good for me. And that really, in many ways, is the foundation for, or even some people would say synonymous with psychological safety.
Hmm. It's so true. And it's interesting because I was thinking about how trust shows up differently in different domains. So in my marriage, I really do. This is just I know I'm cared for. I know like I feel like 1,000% safe with my husband. And I always have my kids, like creating that safety. It's very intuitive for me. But I have to say that this is something in my work environment that I'm the CEO of the company, the founder, and I think sometimes there's been this perception, which perception is reality. That's something else I've learned through your work is it's like your intention doesn't matter. Like how it's showing up for someone else is how it's showing up. But I think as a founder, it's kind of like, oh my gosh, they'll do anything for the mission, including overworking people and all of that. And then I operate pretty quickly. And I'm so different at home. I'm so different in my friendships. I actually lead leaders outside of this and leadership development, but you get me inside my sandbox of my social impact business that, I've been building for a decade now and stopping to really listen and care for people and not just, go for it with the mission. That's been an area of growth for me. I'm kind of embarrassed to admit it.
Oh, don't be. We all have our blind spots and our areas of growth, and really, the only embarrassment would be if you turn your back on it and don't actually work on it.
Right,
So,
right.
so yeah, it sounds like you have been working on it, and wow, how cool is that?
It is. It is. Okay. So care, sincerity.
Yeah, so that one is really about sort of a combination of being honest and acting with integrity, which are really very similar, but there's a little bit of a distinction. Being honest is that you tell the truth, or when you say something, people can believe it. If you offer an opinion, they can trust that you've researched it. You're not just saying something that comes to your mind without a little bit of research behind it, without some grounding behind it. And
Mm,
if you're representing something as true, you actually, to the best of your knowledge, you do in fact believe it's true. So honesty, I can really believe what you say.
mhm.
And then this idea of integrity, which is that if you say something, you say, let's say you have an expressive value that you have, I can expect you to live by that value, to behave in ways that support that value, which is often we live in ways in which we are not completely congruent sometimes. I have worked with leaders who declare something as a value for themselves, and then when they don't do that, and they're not really thinking about it,
Mm,
they're just
mhm.
kind of, doing what they do. And like just a small, teeny tiny example, a leader of a team says, "Okay, I want us all to be able to question each other and our thoughts."
Mm,
And so somebody questions the leader, and the leader just cuts them off, or comes back at them with, "Well, you don't know what you're talking about," or whatever. And the leader may not even realize that they've
mhm.
set themselves up for the expectation that they are going to listen to that different idea. And then when they don't, everybody except them is going to see it, notice it, and they're going to begin to distrust that leader.
Yeah, we really saw this show up for us in the cycle of commitment, which we'll get into next when we talk about reliability. But, what's crucial in that cycle of commitment is the negotiating the request. And we are such a highly productive team and we're really high trust. I will say we've scored the highest on trust in all of our employee surveys. We got best place to work in 2020 in our industry of direct sales. But we recently did a merger acquisition and we are in the middle of a giant transition where we have another company kind of merge under our brand of Noonday Collection. And the survey, the results are dropping quite a bit. And so even with, you put some research in your book, which by the way, thin book of trust, it really is thin. So, I mean, we're giving you the cliff notes, but you don't really don't need cliff notes because you can actually digest and metabolize the book in a day's time. But I will say that, in that cycle of commitment, being a culture that where you can negotiate the request, and you can be a no culture. That's where we've gotten feedback where it's like, okay, you're making a request. We've got the customer performer and the do what by when and all of that. But I think there is a level of, is it okay to negotiate and say no?
Yes.
That's been a major area of growth edge for us.
And it just to be clear, so the trust assessment domain of sincerity is not so much about specific commitments, but rather sort of the more general walk your talk kind of
Walk your
thing.
talk.
Walk your
Yeah.
talk. So if I say I have an open door policy, but then when somebody walks into my office, I'm on the phone and then I'm on my computer and my door's open, yes, but I'm not actually listening to
Listening.
what they say. That's one example of not really walking the talk. Whereas you were starting to talk more about the domain of reliability and specifically using what I call the cycle of commitment to reinforce one's reliability, to have the greatest chance possible that all commitments made, are actually followed through and completed.
I mean, this is so powerful. I mean, it's been great to use at home with my kids instead of just like, hey, clean your room today. It's like, can you I'm making a request. I'm having a clear request. Could you clean your room today? What else do you have to get done? Okay, well, when can you do it by? Like just having these clear commitments and performers and conditions for satisfaction. And I'm like, oh my God, this is so mind blowing and it's so practical. So why don't we get into a little bit of this cycle of commitment?
Sure, and it's kind of interesting that you to bring that up because I'm just at the part almost finished with a project with a client, a company that has the CEO declared that he wanted the entire company to use the cycle of commitment. This is a company that has like about 1,000 some employees, so it's not a huge company, but it's not a small company either.
Mm-hmm.
And he wants to make the cycle of commitment something that everybody does. They use the language, they use the framework, and the reason he wants people to do this is to actually improve everyone's productivity while at the same time reducing stress that comes around. Oh my God, I have all these commitments I've made, and some of them are not completed, and I don't know where I am with them. And oh, by the way, so and so owes me this and that, and I've got to go ask them. I've got to follow up with them over and over again to get what I need from them. And so,
Tell us how this is, because in some ways it's interesting because it can evoke stress at first when you're beginning to learn this framework because it's very direct. My business partner, we're considered more direct, but I would say our culture in general, our employees, like that's not as much the culture that we have. And we work with artisans in vulnerable communities around the world. And most other cultures that we work with are, indirect cultures, just culturally, that's how they are. And so, it can feel a little stress evoking because it is direct language, but then it can reduce the stress because it creates clarity. So yeah, talk to us a little bit about that.
yeah, I hear the words of Brene Brown. I don't know if you're familiar with her, but
Yes, yes.
Clear is kind. So being clear about if I'm asking you for something, being clear about what I'm asking you to do, not because I'm inherently want to be direct and in some cases and in some cultures rude, but rather that I want to be clear enough that you know exactly what I'm asking for so that you can determine if you can deliver. And that's really the reason for a clear, direct, complete request. If you can't deliver, I need to know that now, not when what I asked you for is in my mind due. I need it at this time, and you come back with something that either isn't what I thought I asked you for, or you come back to me and tell me, well, I couldn't do it by this time. I'm sorry, because that's too late. That's problematic for me now. So it's much better for you and for me If I can give you all the information you need to know in my request for
Mm.
you to be able to determine, yeah, I can do that.
Which
Or,
takes so much time on the front end, but it's not even time, it's just effort and thoughtfulness.
yeah,
And then for the person that you're making the request of, like, it's also them getting to have that time to assess the time frame, what's required, et cetera. So it's more on the front end, but then it just absolutely eliminates a lot of the stress that can come when there is a lot of lack of clarity.
yeah, absolutely. Well, I like to tell people it's really valuable to go slow, to go fast, to go
Mhm.
slow up front, because then you are all set to go really fast down the road. And so this is a lot like that, right? Is that in that, yeah, a request, when you think it through before you make it and fill in all the pieces, who's making the request? Is it me, or am I making it on behalf of somebody else? Who am I making it to? Is that the right person? Am I making it to someone who actually has the capability to fulfill, in my opinion, or should be able to? What do I want them to do? Be clear about that. What are you mentioned this term, conditions of satisfaction. What will satisfy me that it's done the way I want it to be done? And that might include, okay, so a simple example is, yeah, all I want is a one-page bullet point, one slide with 4 or 5 bullets on it. I don't need a, 10-slide deck here. Or, I need you to make a phone call, not send an email.
Mhm.
I want you to make a phone call, not send an email. So what are my conditions of satisfaction? Are they clear? Do they give you enough information to know really what I want you to do? What will satisfy me that you've done this? And then, of course, time frame. By when do I need this or want this to be done? And that is probably the most often left off
Mm.
part of a request. When do I want this by? Not that you will be able to do that, but that now as my chosen performer, now what I'm asking for, and you can assess: can I really get it? I know what it is that he wants. I know what his conditions of satisfaction are, and I know by when. Can I do this in this time frame? And what will it take? And now you're in a position to say yes. That's one response. Yes, I can do exactly what you're asking. Or no, I can't do what you're asking at all. Or I won't do what you're asking at all, which is not common in a business environment. Usually, what we do is make a counteroffer,
Mm.
which might sound like, Jessica, I can't do exactly what you're asking. I can't do it in the time frame. Can't get it done by Friday. I could get it done by Monday. Or I can't do all of what you're asking because I just don't have the resources or the expertise. If we're willing to bring in help, that would be great. Or, that would make it work. Or, if you're my boss, help me prioritize, Jessica. Tell me which things that are currently on my plate that I should kind of push back so that I can get what you're asking done by the end of the day.
And then there's the reporting completion, which is something that we definitely did not have present. And that is this other word, because that really, for me, I'm a customer often at my company, just in the position that I hold. And so just that declaring of completion it also gives you a chance to really celebrate, sort of, okay, we made a request, it's been declared complete. Here's my satisfaction with that. It's so simple, but it makes such a huge difference.
Yes, yeah, it does. And it doesn't have to be a big deal. It can just be simply thank you. It's especially, well, there's the reporting completion part, right? Especially when what you've asked for is for me to go do something that I'm going to deliver, if you will, to somebody else. Let's go back to that phone call, for example. I make that phone call. But reporting completion is when I say, I've done it. Hey, Jessica, I did it this afternoon, just to let you know. So now you can declare satisfaction. Great, thank you very much.
So good.
Very
And
simple,
it's
but
simple. And it's
Yeah.
so great with parenting. I'm telling you, and instead of this like, go clean your room, it's like, okay, can you clean your room? And my conditions of satisfaction, they're going to be really different than my teenage boys, So to define
And
that.
yes, and that's a place where you might want to negotiate, right?
Right. That's true. That's true. Like, okay, good enough for me is going to be, the dirty clothes they're at least not on the bed, like they'll say they clean their room by moving their dirty clothes from the floor to the bed. I'm like, no, that is not satisfactory for me. But it is really great language. And then the last distinction that you have is this idea of competence. I think the reason it means a lot to me is I'm definitely a Jill of all trades. I am not a spike. I'm an entrepreneur, a pretty typical entrepreneur that kind of learned on her feet. And of course, now I'm, 12 years in and I am having this new emerging sense of competence, which is really cool, where suddenly I'm like, oh, I'm a good leader. I can go into some hard conversations and gosh, I think I can help someone feel really listened to and heard. And so there's these emerging areas of competence. I also think if you struggle a little bit with perfectionism, then it's like, at what point are you fully like competent, in something? But talk to us a little bit about competency as it relates to trust.
Yeah. Well, I think that the key in this trust assessment domain is standards, shared standards. What do you and I both, that kind of touches on the conditions of satisfaction in a complete request, and it goes beyond that in the sense of what do you consider a competent leader, and does that match what the people you're leading consider to be the actions and behaviors of a competent leader? Understanding what everybody considers to be the standard that you're working to, that you're aiming towards, so that you can then make assessments about competence. And again, it can become rather than, oh God, he just did X, which is is a sign of lack of competence for sure. You can now have a conversation about, okay, so you know what, we all decided that this was what competence looks like, sounds like to all of us together. And you know what? I can then automatically, or not automatically, but right away, I can begin to see where I'm falling short and say, hey, I can't do that. I'm not
Not
able yet to
equipped. Yeah.
do that yet. Can you support me in learning more? I'm still learning. I'm learning on the job. Or can you help me out with this and support me? Can you, if you're my boss, I can say, hey, I don't think I can do this. These kinds of things that you're asking me to do to the level of competence, the standard of competence then that you're expecting from me and that you've shared with me. And so now I can ask for help, support, so that I
And it
can
really
meet
is about
your.
conversations, right? Underlying all of this is what are the missing conversations? And oftentimes we aren't having those kind of conversations.
Yeah. One of the things that I talk with leaders about is the notion that one of the ways that you can define an organization is as a network of conversations. This comes from Bob Dunham, by the way, generative leadership. But the idea that an organization is a network of conversations, and the more effectively people are having conversations, the right conversations with the right people at the right times and in the right ways, the more successful that organization is going to be.
And then you add trust to those conversations. Like if these are conversations where there is safety, I mean, man, that organization is unstoppable.
Yeah. Yeah. When there's the right way for me means that
Means safety.
there's trust in the relationship. But here's a good example of a place where I didn't share the standard. Right.
Right.
So part of the right way, the standard for the right way, is that there's trust in the relationship, sufficient trust so that people can actually engage in that conversation. And that conversation may be a debate about what's the right way to go. And I may have a very different idea than you do, but we can really get into it and we can argue and debate what's the right way to go, or what's the way we should do this, or whatever it is. If we trust each other, if we trust that our debate is going to remain at the level of task or the level of ideas, and I'm not going to suddenly turn and start attacking you as a person.
Oh my gosh. I know. God, it feels like there's these critical elements that need to be present to create those kind of conversations where safety is present. But when it is, like when debate can happen, that just already is just a sign that there's healthy trust in the room where no one feels diminished and everyone feels listened to. Okay, I want to talk about this other myth that I hear a lot is that trust takes a long time to build, but can be destroyed in an instant.
Yeah, I hear that a lot too. And first of all, it doesn't always take a long time to build. You can build some pretty strong trust pretty quickly. To really cement it, it does take a bit of time. Again, I'm going to go back to Brene Brown again for a moment. She talks about trust is built in the small moments. It's when we make ourselves vulnerable to each other, when we do follow through, with our actions in a way that people see as trustworthy. Doesn't have to be a big thing. It can be a small thing. And in fact, a lot of small things build up to a big thing over time of really strong trust. Then there's it can be destroyed in an instant. And my experience with that, both personally and in observing it in other people, is yes, it can be seemingly destroyed in an instant, except that when there is strong trust, there's the foundation for being able to go back and talk about what happened, what it is that's damaged the trust, or even truly betrayed the trust, so that repair can be made. And also, generally speaking, trust can be damaged in the small things as well as it can be built in the
That's
small
so
things.
true. Gosh, you're right. I mean, those little things like, some typical old fashioned version is like the husband who says he's going to be home for dinner, and like multiple nights, multiple weeks is like never home when, he says he's going to be home. And that feels so small, but over time it erodes trust.
Yeah, absolutely. Saying I'll do this, whatever it is. We have our teenage kids to think about in this respect too, right?
Totally. Oh my gosh. That's what I actually wanted to ask you about because switching gears to parenting teens a little bit, because I mean, listen, teens are going to go off and do things you don't want them to do. I mean, this is just the nature of that developmental stage of their lives, but then you find them out, right? I mean, come on, we've all found. I mean, I have found things that my kids did not tell me about. How do I have that conversation? Because trust is broken. I mean, my trust is broken, but I think in the past it's been more like, so I don't trust you anymore. You're not trustworthy. But I think your framework creates these distinctions. So is it being able to have this conversation about, is it reliability? Is it sincerity? Talk to me. I know you've raised kids.
Yeah, and it's so much easier working with leaders in a company.
Yeah, totally. That's for darn sure.
So much easier. Yeah. Well, and partly because in that relationship with our children, we're so invested. The
Right.
stakes,
The
to
care
us,
is there.
the
Yeah.
care is there. The stakes are very, very high to us. Over time, of course, looking back, I have a teenage, 18-year-old. So he's still kind of in that teenage realm. He's out of high school, he's in college, but and then I also have my oldest daughter will turn 50 next spring. So
Wow.
I've seen it kind of go, the long haul. And I look
Yeah.
back and I go, oh yeah, okay.
Gosh, what great perspective. Do share. Do share. Those of us that are raising these teens right now, especially too, we're kind of the first ones to be doing it in this. Well, we are. We're not kind of. We're the first ones to be doing it in this technological age.
Yeah.
And there's no playbook. Like I feel like you used to have these mentors, right, that you could go to, but the world has changed so quickly just in the last 10 years that, even the 25-year-olds that are mentoring my kids are like, oh yeah, I didn't have Snap or, et cetera. So yeah, talk to us about these conversations around trust with our kids and what those look like. Yeah. How do you apply this? I'm putting you on the personal spot.
You are, and I'll have to tell you, I'm not really that good at it sometimes. I've
Mm,
made some pretty significant gaffes. And looking back at how my older kids, my 49-year-old and my 43-year-old, have become really wonderful human beings, adult human beings,
mm.
and who are raising their own kids and doing a fabulous job of it.
Let's say you find something on your teen's phone that
Right.
it's like,
Or you find a vape pen, or you find,
right,
in their pocket when you're doing the laundry. Well, I think the first thing to do is, before you even have that confrontational conversation, they need to know that you care about them,
mm,
that trust in the domain of care is there, that
mm.
you love them, that you care about them. I even remember looking back at my own childhood, teenagehood.
Right. I mean, come on, we all have been there. Yes.
We've been there. We've done stuff that we didn't want our parents to know about, because we were afraid that somehow they would think poorly of us, that they and want to intervene and change something. And of course they did, or would have, or
Right.
do. And just
Right.
like we do, I don't want my kids vaping, and there's good reasons for that. And so
Right.
I want him, first of all, to know that that's where I'm coming from. I'm not coming from, oh, I have a rule about this. It's still going to be hard, because they want to, they're going to do what they want to do, or they're going to try really, really hard to do what they want to do, in spite of what you want them to do. And so it's a dance. I think talking about it from the perspective of, I really do care about you. Just like, when I have a conversation, if I were to have a conversation with somebody in the work domain around behavior that they have that I find really untrustworthy, I can say, here's the behavior that's a problem, and here's why I think it's a problem, why I'm concerned about it. And you may think that you know everything now, and that's, gotta hand it to kids. They always do. I did. I knew everything, and my parents were idiots.
Right. That is
And
the narrative. That has not changed.
no, there's nothing different about that.
No.
Whether, even in our age of, the internet. So I have to help them really think about, especially as they're growing and learning about themselves. I want to help them make choices for themselves intentionally, not just because I want them to do it this way, but because they need to learn to be responsible for themselves. So there's sometimes you just got to say no, right?
Right.
You just, look, you can't go to that party. I have a pretty good idea of what's going to, no, I really have a pretty good idea of what's going to be going on at that party. And I don't want you to be involved with that. Or, hey, vaping is really not good for you. I really don't want you to be doing it. So let's talk about this. And what's important to you about, why do you want to do it in the first place? What's important to you about it? Oh, well, it's just because everyone else is doing it. Okay, let's talk about that. What's important to you? I get it that you want to be, you want to be in with those folks. Your friends are doing it. You don't want to seem like you are doing something different. You're not with them. And let's talk about how you can manage that ground, how you can be yourself. It's a difficult
It is. I'm telling you.
road to walk down.
Nothing's been harder. Nothing's been harder than the teenage years. I tell you what. But it's good stuff.
And, the kids ultimately almost always turn into the kind of adults that we can be proud of, be happy.
That's right. That's right. That's cool. I love your perspective. Getting a 50-year-old all the way down to an 18-year-old. Well, Charles, thank you so much. Again, The Thin Book of Trust, you've launched your second edition, and it just it's essential reading. That's what it is. It is essential reading. And thank you for sharing with us today.
You're very welcome, Jessica. It's been a pleasure talking with you.
Our music for today's show is by my good friend Ellie Holcomb, and I'm Jessica Honegger. Until next time, let's take each other by the hand and keep going scared.